Today, we're making a variation of the Dan Dan noodles using only ingredients you can easily find in the supermarket. So no need to hunt down the elusive Sichuan preserved mustard green. Let's do it. Like any good Sichuan recipes, we start by toasting the Sichuan peppercorn. Like most peppers, the flavors of the Sichuan peppercorns are mainly on the surface of the skin. And by toasting them, we really get the essential oils going, giving us a lot more flavors. Once the room is fragrant, pesto mortar, peppercorn in. The grinding motion would once again bring out the best from the essential oils. Perfect, set this aside. In the same pot, we bring in more heat and we add a generous amount of high smoke point neutral oil. In this case, vegetable oil. Once the oil starts to shimmer, we add our pork mince. Break them apart. What we're trying to do here is through heat, which causing the Maillard reaction, the protein and the natural sugar reacting with each other, making the meat taste meaty. The difference between a steak and boiled meat. Season with salt. And the first round of our toasted Sichuan peppercorn. It's very important to add this in stages because you get different flavors out of it. When they're given time to cook out, they bring a lot of depth and complexity and they lose most of the numbing sensation, which of course we'll reintroduce at the very end. While our meat is browning, we grate some ginger. This will not only add flavor, but tame any unwanted gaminess from the pork. Perfect, ginger goes in. A bit of scallion, just the white part at this point. We'll save the green part for garnish. Now, to complete the holy trinity, a bit of garlic. And garlic always goes in last because it has the most sugar content and they burn the fastest. Now, what does the elusive Sichuan preserved mustard bring to the table? Well, a bit of sweetness, a bit of earthy flavor, and a bit of funk from the fermentation, of course. So, to replace that, we enlist the help of two of my favorite ingredients. Kale for the strong earthiness and subtle sweetness, and spinach for the strong sweetness and subtle earthiness. For that, we're using mostly leaves. The kale would of course also bring the texture that you associate with the preserved mustard leaves. And since this really is the star of the show, I would go as much as 1:1 pork to kale ratio in terms of weight. I think by now it's very obvious on this channel, I just really like kale. And we chop them relatively fine. And they go straight in to start wilting down, building flavors. Now for the spinach, we take a bit of the stalks to add a bit more subtle earthiness. For me, the ideal ratio is 2 parts kale, 1 part spinach. Now, we season with salt, another round of toasted Sichuan peppercorn. Continue to build depth and flavor. And we lower the heat to medium to evaporate the water content of the kale and the spinach, concentrating their flavors, the sweetness in particular, and building depth. You want to get to a point where you can no longer see the vibrant green color from the kale. That's the flavor profile we're going for. Now, once there's not much steam coming out, we start to introduce the missing funk from the fermentation. Here we have some Chinese dark vinegar. You can also use Worcestershire sauce. If you don't have Worcestershire sauce, balsamic would work well. Normally, I often suggest adding vinegar last because acidity evaporates. But today, we're not looking for acidity, at least not yet. We're looking for the funky notes, the tangy goodness. And you really want to work this into the veg. And that's why we're adding it here, not at the very end. Take this opportunity to scrape the bottom of the pot to mop up all the burn bits, all the fronds, all the flavors from the pork. We also season with soy sauce for the added umami. And of course, I sound like a broken record, another round of Sichuan peppercorn. We also add a bit of Sichuan chili oil. At this stage, it's extremely important that you take the solids from the chili oil. This is practically the flesh and the skin of your dried chilies, while the oil takes everything that's fat soluble. We're now going to bring out all the water soluble flavors. Normally, the creaminess from the Dan Dan noodle comes from the Chinese sesame paste, which can be hard to find. So today, to make it simple, we'll add just a touch of toasted sesame oil for the toasted sesame note, and we'll deal with the creaminess with our secret weapon later. And just like the other ingredients, we save the other half to finish the dish. Now, we cover everything with water. Bring this back to a boil, lid on, and we let it simmer for at least 20 minutes, up to an hour. This is the color and texture that you're looking for. Taste. Oh, tastes like happiness. But on a serious note, you should be able to detect the fermentation that did not occur. Now, to bring the creaminess, we have very controversial, but some linguine. We are going to use the surface starch of the dry pasta to make the dish creamy and allow all the flavors to cling on to the surface in the process. So, very simple. We add a very generous ladle or two of this wonderful sauce, a bit of boiling water, bring in some heat, and we start cooking our pasta here directly to really allow the starch to be released into the cooking liquid and thus thickening everything, making the whole dish creamy without the need for the sesame paste or any kind of cream. The best way to think about this is imagine you're making a risotto. You keep stirring, keep mothering, keep releasing the starch while preventing the pasta from sticking together. And you keep topping it up with just enough water to cover everything. And you use the packaging as the guideline. Once you get close to the end of the suggested cooking time, you stop adding the water and you start reducing this wonderful sauce. Now, once you're close to al dente, we start the reduction. And to reinforce the seasoning and further prevent them from sticking together, we're now going to add the oil element of the chili oil, the other half of our toasted sesame oil. You can be quite generous this time, just because we're replacing the sesame paste, and now you really have to stir vigorously. Just look at the creamy consistency of the liquid even now. Once you have this wonderful creamy texture, stove off. Now we add the black vinegar once again, this time for the acidity. Taste, touch more soy sauce, even more chili oil, and of course, Sichuan peppercorn. This time for the numbing sensation, so not too much. The scallion green we reserved. And this is Dan Dan Linguine. Is it as good as the original? Well, cook it and you'll find out.